Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. Every atom in your body right now is mostly empty space. If you removed all that emptiness and packed just the solid matter together, you, in your entirety, every memory, every laugh, every tear, would fit on the head of a pin. And yet here you are, magnificently real, taking up space in the world, feeling the weight of your own existence. Isn't that the most beautiful contradiction you've ever heard? Tonight, I want to share something with you that's going to change how you see everything. I'm talking about quantum physics, but not the way you learned it in school, not the intimidating equations and the stern-faced professors. I'm talking about the poetry hidden inside reality itself, the gentle truths that live at the heart of existence, the kind of facts that don't just teach you about the universe, they teach you about yourself. Because here's what I've discovered after years of falling down this rabbit hole. Quantum physics isn't really about particles and waves. It's about possibility. It's about how the universe is far stranger, far more generous, and far more forgiving than we ever imagined. And when you truly understand these concepts, when you let them sink into your bones, something shifts. The anxiety loosens its grip. The racing thoughts begin to slow. You remember that you're part of something infinite and mysterious and utterly magnificent. So get comfortable. Pull your blanket a little closer. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just information. It's an invitation to see the world and yourself with entirely new eyes. And I promise you, by the time we're done here, you're going to feel different. Calmer, more connected, maybe even a little bit in awe. Now, before we dive into the deep end, I need to tell you why this matters. Why should you, lying there in the dark, care about something as abstract as quantum physics? Here's why. Because you are quantum physics. Every breath you take, every thought that crosses your mind, every feeling that wells up in your chest, it's all happening because of quantum events. You are not separate from this story. You are the story. And here's the thing that's going to help you sleep tonight, the thing that's going to quiet that worried voice in your head. Quantum physics reveals that uncertainty isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. The universe, at its most fundamental level, doesn't deal in certainties. It deals in probabilities, in possibilities, in gentle maybes. And if the universe itself can exist in this state of beautiful uncertainty, and still create stars and galaxies and you, then maybe, just maybe, it's okay that you don't have everything figured out either. Let me take you back to where this all began, because every revolution starts with someone asking a simple question that everyone else was too afraid to ask. Picture Germany in the early 1900s. The world thinks it has physics all figured out. Newton's laws explain motion. Maxwell's equations explain light. Everything is clockwork, predictable, neat. Scientists are so confident they're saying there's nothing left to discover except maybe a few decimal places. But then there's this problem, this tiny annoying problem that won't go away. It's called the ultraviolet catastrophe, and it sounds dramatic because it is. When physicists calculate how much energy a hot object should radiate, their equations predict it should release infinite energy at ultraviolet wavelengths. Infinite, which obviously doesn't happen because if it did, every warm object would destroy the universe. Your coffee mug would be a weapon of mass destruction. Enter Max Planck, a quiet, somewhat conservative German physicist who just wanted to solve this little math problem. He wasn't trying to revolutionize anything. He was just trying to make the numbers work. And in 1900, he proposed something radical. What if energy doesn't flow smoothly like water? What if it comes in tiny, discrete packets, like grains of sand? He called these packets quanta. Planck himself didn't really believe it was true. He thought it was just a mathematical trick. But that mathematical trick opened a door that nobody could close. Because once you start looking at the quantum level, reality stops making sense in the way you expect. And that's not terrifying, that's liberating. Here's what I want you to understand. The scientists who discovered quantum physics weren't trying to make things complicated. They were trying to make sense of what they were seeing. And what they were seeing was so strange, so counterintuitive, that it broke their hearts a little. Einstein, one of the architects of quantum theory, spent the rest of his life trying to prove it wrong because it bothered him so much. He famously said, "God does not play dice with the universe." But here's the beautiful part. The universe didn't care what Einstein thought. It kept being weird and wonderful anyway. Now I know what you might be thinking. This sounds complicated. This sounds like something you need a PhD to understand. But that's not true. The mathematics is complicated, sure. But the ideas, the real profound ideas at the heart of quantum physics, They're actually quite simple. They're just unfamiliar. And tonight I'm going to make them familiar. I'm going to introduce you to a universe that's more magical than any fantasy novel and more real than the bed you're lying in. Let's start with the first relaxing fact, and I mean truly relaxing. Everything is connected. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally, physically, measurably connected. Quantum entanglement proves that two particles, once they've interacted, remain connected no matter how far apart they are. You could separate them by the entire width of the universe, and when you measure one, the other responds instantly. Not at the speed of light, instantly. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, and he hated it. But experiment after experiment has confirmed it's real, and here's why that should help you sleep. You are made of particles that have been interacting with other particles since the beginning of time. The atoms in your left hand have entangled with the atoms in your right hand. The particles that make up your body have histories with particles across the entire universe. You are not alone. You cannot be alone. You are woven into the fabric of everything that exists. Think about that for a moment. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a star that exploded billions of years ago. Those atoms scattered across space, eventually coming together to form the planet, the air, the water, and eventually you. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon in your DNA, it all came from stars. You are literally made of stardust. That's not poetry, that's physics. And those atoms don't forget their history. They carry with them the information of every interaction they've ever had. In a very real sense, you contain multitudes. You contain the story of the universe. Every breath you take connects you to every other breath that's ever been taken. The oxygen you just inhaled was once breathed by dinosaurs, by Cleopatra, by someone's grandmother laughing at a joke in a kitchen somewhere. This is the first thing I want you to let sink in as you drift off tonight. Separation is an illusion. At the quantum level, at the deepest level of reality, everything touches everything else. You are not an isolated island. You are a wave in an infinite ocean, distinct and beautiful, but never truly separate. Now let's talk about the second profoundly relaxing fact. Observation creates reality. This is where quantum physics gets really weird and really wonderful. There's an experiment called the double-slit experiment, and it's been called the most beautiful experiment in physics. Here's how it works. You take a particle, let's say an electron, and you shoot it at a screen with two slits in it. Behind that screen is another screen that records where the electron lands. Simple enough, right? You'd expect the electron to go through one slit or the other and hit the back screen, but that's not what happens. Instead, the electron seems to go through both slits at once, creating an interference pattern on the back screen, the kind of pattern you get with waves, not particles. It's as if the electron is somehow in two places at the same time, interfering with itself. This is called superposition, and it's one of the core mysteries of quantum physics. But here's where it gets truly strange. The moment you put a detector at the slits to see which one the electron goes through, the interference pattern disappears. The electron starts behaving like a particle again, going through one slit or the other. The act of observation literally changes what happens. Reality at the quantum level is not fixed until it's observed. Now, I can hear some of you getting anxious about this. Does this mean nothing is real unless we look at it? Does this mean reality is just in our heads? No, not quite. But it does mean something profound. The universe is participatory. You are not a passive observer of reality. You are a co-creator of it. Your attention matters. Your observation matters. You matter. And here's the relaxing part. If reality is not fixed until it's observed, then the future is not written. Every moment contains infinite possibility. The mistakes you made yesterday, the worries you have about tomorrow, they exist in superposition with countless other outcomes. You are not locked into a single predetermined path. You are walking through a garden of forking paths, and every choice you make collapses the wave function of your life into one reality out of infinite potential realities. That anxiety you're carrying about how things will turn out, the universe itself doesn't know how things will turn out until they do. Uncertainty is not a flaw in your life. It's the fundamental nature of existence. And within that uncertainty lies all your power, all your freedom, all your possibility. Let me tell you a story about Werner Heisenberg, another one of the founders of quantum physics. In 1927, he discovered something that would become known as the uncertainty principle. It states that you cannot simultaneously know both the exact position and the exact momentum of a particle. The more precisely you measure one, the less precisely you can know the other. It's not a limitation of our instruments. It's a fundamental property of reality. Heisenberg was young when he discovered this, only 26 years old, and the story goes that he was walking in a park late one night, trying to wrap his mind around the implications of what he'd found. And he realized the universe, at its heart, is uncertain, not because we're not smart enough to figure it out, but because certainty doesn't exist at that level. The universe itself is improvising, moment by moment. And instead of finding this terrifying, Heisenberg found it liberating. Because if the universe doesn't require certainty to function, if reality itself can exist in a state of quantum flux and still create beauty and order and life, then maybe we don't need to have everything figured out either. Maybe it's okay to not know. Maybe it's okay to exist in the question. Think about what keeps you awake at night. I'm willing to bet it's not the present moment. Right now, in this instant, you're probably okay. You're safe in your bed, you're breathing, you're alive. What keeps us awake is the phantom future and the ghost past. We lie there replaying conversations that already happened, rehearsing disasters that haven't occurred and probably never will. But quantum physics teaches us something crucial about time. At the quantum level, the future is not determined. Not even close. The wave function of the universe, the quantum state that describes all possible outcomes, is constantly collapsing in real time, creating reality moment by moment. The future quite literally does not exist yet. It exists only as probability, as potential. And the past? The past is more fixed, certainly, but even it is not quite what you think. Every memory you have is reconstructed every time you recall it, physically rebuilt in your neural pathways, which are themselves quantum systems. Your memory of an event is not like playing back a recording. It's like rewriting the story every time you tell it. The past is not as solid as it feels. So what does exist? Only this, only now. Only this breath, this moment, this feeling of your body against the mattress. And in this moment, everything is okay. In this moment, you don't need to know what happens next week or next year. In this moment, you can rest in the quantum uncertainty of existence and trust that reality will continue to figure itself out, just as it's been doing for 13.8 billion years. Let me share the third relaxing fact. Emptiness is fullness. Remember how I started by telling you that atoms are mostly empty space? It's true. An atom is 99.999% empty space. The nucleus is tiny, and the electrons are even tinier, and the space between them is vast. If an atom were the size of a football stadium, the nucleus would be a marble at the center, and the electrons would be tiny specks orbiting near the outer walls. So if atoms are basically empty, and you're made of atoms, then you're basically empty too. But here's the thing, that emptiness is not nothing. That space is seething with energy, packed full of what physicists call the quantum vacuum. And the quantum vacuum is anything but empty. Virtual particles are constantly popping into and out of existence in this so-called empty space. Think of it like this. The space between stars, between atoms, between thoughts, it's not silent nothingness. It's more like the surface of a pond that looks perfectly still until you lean in close and see it's actually trembling with tiny ripples, each one appearing and disappearing in less than a blink. These virtual particles come in pairs, a particle and its antiparticle. They flash into existence, exist for an impossibly brief moment, then collide and annihilate each other, returning to the vacuum. The entire life cycle happens so quickly that it doesn't violate the laws of physics. It's like the universe is borrowing energy for a fraction of a second and paying it back before anyone notices. But here's the extraordinary thing. We've actually detected evidence of this. Scientists have measured what's called the Casimir effect, where two metal plates placed extremely close together in a vacuum experience a tiny force pushing them together. Why? Because the quantum fluctuations between the plates are constrained, fewer virtual particles can pop into existence in that narrow gap while the full range of fluctuations continues outside the plates. The imbalance creates a measurable force. Empty space is pushing on metal plates. Let that settle in. This means the vacuum has structure. It has energy. It's dynamic and alive in ways we never imagined when we first looked up at the night sky and saw darkness between the stars. And this vacuum energy might be connected to one of the most profound mysteries in all of cosmology. Dark energy. That mysterious force causing the expansion of the universe to accelerate. Some physicists believe dark energy could be a manifestation of the quantum vacuum energy filling all of space, pressing outward, driving galaxies apart. If that's true, then emptiness isn't just something that exists. It's something that acts. It has power. It shapes the destiny of everything. You're resting in a universe where even the spaces between things are full of potential, where nothing is never truly nothing, where the pauses between your breaths are as rich with possibility as the breaths themselves. The stillness you feel right now, it's not absence. It's presence without performance, like snow falling in the middle of the night when no one is watching. Each flake still intricate, still perfect, still adding its whisper weight to the accumulation that will transform the landscape by morning. Your body knows how to rest without announcing it. Your cells don't send out notifications when they repair themselves. Your neurons don't require your conscious approval to consolidate memories while you drift. The most profound work happens in the quietest rooms. And perhaps that's what we forget in our rush to optimize everything, to maximize every moment, to extract productivity from even our leisure time. We forget that fallow fields yield better harvests, that musicians rest between notes not because they're empty of music, but because the silence gives the sound somewhere to land. You don't need to be interesting right now. You don't need to have insights or revelations or breakthroughs. You can simply be the field in winter, appearing empty but secretly rebuilding richness beneath the surface where no eye can measure it. There's a concept in Japanese aesthetics called ma, the meaningful space between things. Not emptiness, but interval. The pause that gives shape to what comes before and after. Your life has these intervals too, though we're taught to fear them, to fill them, to treat them like gaps that need patching rather than spaces that give structure to everything else. This moment right now is ma, this breath, this gentle descent into rest. You're not falling behind while you lie here. You're not losing ground. You're creating the interval that makes the next movement possible, the way a rest in music creates the tension that makes the next note matter. Your heartbeat knows this rhythm already. 4 beats of contraction, then the brief pause, that split second of rest that lets the chambers fill again. Your heart has been practicing the art of strategic pause since before you were born. It has beaten over 2 billion times in your life, and every single beat was followed by a moment of letting go. You are so much wiser than you give yourself credit for. Your body is conducting an orchestra of processes right now, and it doesn't need you to micromanage a single instrument. It knows when to tense and when to release, when to surge and when to settle. And yet, somewhere along the way we convinced ourselves that we needed to be involved, that healing required our constant supervision. We turned recovery into a performance we had to perfect, rest into a skill we had to master, and sleep into yet another task on the endless list of things we're doing wrong. But here's what actually happens when you fall asleep tonight. Your brain will begin cycling through stages you've never consciously experienced. It will spend time in light sleep, then deeper, then REM, then back again, following a rhythm it's repeated since you were an infant. During the deep stages, your body will release growth hormones that repair tissue damage from the day. Your immune system will ramp up production of cytokines, those proteins that fight infection and inflammation. Your brain will flush out metabolic waste through the lymphatic system, a cleaning process that happens almost exclusively during sleep. You won't direct any of this. You won't even know it's happening. Your heart rate will drop. Your blood pressure will decrease. Your muscles will cycle through moments of complete paralysis during REM sleep, preventing you from acting out your dreams, then partial relaxation during other stages. Your body temperature will fall slightly, then rise again before morning. Your digestive system will continue its work, slower now, but steady. Meanwhile, your mind will construct dreams from the raw material of memory, emotion, and random neural firing. These dreams might feel significant or utterly bizarre, but they're part of how your brain processes, consolidates, and sometimes discards the experiences you've collected. You're not controlling this either. You're not deciding which memories to keep or which emotions to explore. It's all happening automatically, guided by systems far older and wiser than your conscious worry. This is the intelligence you carry. Not the intelligence of optimization and control, but the intelligence of knowing. Your body knows how to heal a cut without you understanding cellular regeneration. It knows how to fight a virus without you memorizing immunology. It knows how to rest without you perfecting the art of stillness. And perhaps that's the wisdom we've forgotten in our obsession with optimization. We've confused awareness with control. We think that understanding something means we should be managing it, improving it, manipulating it towards some better outcome. But your body doesn't operate on the principle of constant improvement. It operates on the principle of balance, of return, of cycles that repeat because they work. You don't need to understand the sodium-potassium pump to benefit from it regulating every nerve impulse in your body. You don't need to comprehend the intricacies of ATP synthesis for your cells to produce energy. You don't need to master the science of neurotransmitters for serotonin to influence your mood. These things happen whether you're paying attention or not, whether you believe in them or not, whether you've earned them or not. Your body is remarkably unimpressed by your credentials. It doesn't care if you've meditated for 10 years or never sat still for 5 minutes. It doesn't reward you with better digestion because you finally read that book about gut health. It just digests, repairs, regulates, and continues. And maybe that's what makes sleep so uncomfortable for those of us who live primarily in our heads. Sleep asks nothing of our intelligence. It can't be reasoned with. It can't be negotiated with. It doesn't care about your insights or your breakthroughs, or your carefully constructed arguments about why you should be allowed to stay awake a little longer. Sleep just waits, patient, inevitable, like gravity. You can fight it, but you can't win. You can delay it, but you can't defeat it. Eventually, your body will take what it needs, whether you give permission or not. And isn't there something almost comforting in that? In knowing that no matter how much you try to override your own nature, your body has the final say. It will rest. It will repair. It will dream. Not because you've optimized your routine or found the perfect pillow or eliminated blue light from your evening, but because rest is what bodies do. It's what they've always done. Your body has been resting since before you were born. In the fluid darkness of the womb, you spent most of your time in sleep-like states. Your developing brain cycling through phases of activity and quiet, your tiny limbs twitching as neural pathways formed and strengthened. You were resting then, and you didn't have to learn how. Even now, parts of you are always resting. Your heart rests between beats, those brief essential pauses that let the chambers refill. Without that rest, the next contraction wouldn't be possible. Your neurons rest between firing. Your muscles rest between contractions. Your lungs rest at the bottom of each exhale, that quiet moment before the next breath begins. Rest isn't something that happens only when you decide it should. It's woven into every function of your living system. And when you do sleep, you're joining a process that's been unfolding for millions of years. The same neurochemicals that make you drowsy made your ancestors drowsy. The same circadian rhythms that pull you toward sleep at night pulled cave-dwelling humans toward their fires as darkness fell. Sleep is old. Older than language, older than tools, older than fire. Scientists have found sleep-like states in fruit flies, in worms, in jellyfish. Creatures without complex brains still have periods of reduced activity and responsiveness, still have something like rest built into their biology. This tells us something important. Rest isn't a luxury feature added to advanced organisms. It's fundamental. It's something life discovered early and kept because it works. You carry that ancient pattern inside you right now. The pull toward sleep you feel isn't a personal failing or a modern problem to solve. It's your inheritance. It's evolution speaking through your eyelids, your yawning jaw, your heavy limbs. And you can trust it. Not because you've earned the right to trust it through perfect behavior. Not because you've been good enough or productive enough or healthy enough today, but because it's been working since before you had words for it. Since before you had thoughts about it. Your body knows how to sleep the way it knows how to heal a cut, digest a meal, or grow new cells to replace old ones. Your nervous system has been practicing sleep for your entire life. Every night, whether you remember it or not, whether you were aware of it or not, your body has been refining this process, making it smoother, more efficient, more automatic. Think about all the nights you've already slept. If you're 30 years old, that's roughly 10,000 nights of practice. 10,000 times your body has successfully transitioned from waking to sleeping. 10,000 times it has navigated the complex cascade of biological events that constitute sleep, and most of those times, you weren't even trying. You weren't consciously controlling your heart rate, or deliberately adjusting your body temperature, or manually triggering the release of sleep chemicals in your brain. You were just letting it happen. And that's the extraordinary part. Your body doesn't need your permission to sleep. It doesn't need your active participation. In fact, your participation often makes it harder. The more you try to force sleep, the more you engage the very systems that keep you alert and vigilant. It's like trying to force yourself to stop thinking about a pink elephant. The effort itself creates the obstacle. But when you step back, when you simply allow the process to unfold as it has thousands of times before, sleep comes naturally. Not because you've done something clever or employed some special technique, but because your body remembers. Your nervous system recognizes the conditions for sleep and responds accordingly. This is why sleep isn't something you achieve. It's something you allow. It's not a mountain you climb through sheer determination. It's a door you walk through by simply removing the barriers you've unconsciously placed in front of it. And right now, those barriers are already starting to dissolve. Your breathing has probably shifted without you noticing. Maybe it's a bit slower now, a bit deeper. Your shoulders might have released some tension they were holding. Your jaw might be slightly more relaxed than it was a few minutes ago. These aren't things you've made happen. They're things that are happening through you as your body recognizes that it's safe to begin the transition toward rest. And perhaps most importantly, you don't have to monitor this process. You don't have to check in on your relaxation, evaluate its depth, measure its progress. The moment you try to control it, you're reactivating the very systems that prevent rest. It's like trying to fall asleep by thinking about falling asleep. The effort itself becomes the obstacle. This is why so many sleep techniques fail. They give you something to do, something to achieve, another task to complete before you're allowed to rest. But sleep isn't earned through performance. It's received through release. The body already knows how. Every cell in your body has been preparing for this since the moment you were born. Your nervous system has orchestrated this transition thousands of times. The knowledge isn't in your mind, it's deeper, older, more fundamental than thought. So when people ask, how do I fall asleep? The question itself contains a misunderstanding. You don't fall asleep. You stop preventing sleep. You stop doing the tiny, invisible things that keep you awake, the monitoring, the evaluating, the trying. And those things stop not through force, but through simple acknowledgement. You notice you're checking your relaxation level, and in noticing, the checking loses its grip. You observe your mind planning tomorrow, and in that observation, the planning naturally quiets. This isn't suppression. You're not pushing thoughts away. You're simply seeing them clearly, which removes their urgency. A thought that's seen doesn't need to be thought again immediately. It can wait. It will be there tomorrow if it needs attention. Right now, you might notice your breathing has changed without you directing it. Perhaps it's slower. Perhaps it's simply more easeful, requiring less involvement from you. This is your body demonstrating that it can manage itself beautifully when you step back from micromanaging every function. Your heart has been beating without your supervision since before you were born. Your lungs have been breathing through sleep, through unconsciousness, through every moment you've ever forgotten to pay attention. These systems don't need your conscious oversight. They're much older and wiser than your thinking mind. Which brings us to something worth considering as you settle deeper into rest. Your brain, even now, is performing an astonishing feat. It's taking these words, converting sound waves or visual symbols into electrical impulses, routing them through networks of neurons, accessing memory banks to decode meaning, all while maintaining your heartbeat, regulating your temperature, and preparing your body for the restoration of sleep. You're not directing any of this. You're simply here, present, while trillions of processes unfold beneath the surface of your awareness. There's a particular comfort in recognizing that consciousness itself is just one small room in the vast mansion of your being. Your conscious mind, the part that worries and plans and narrates your experience, occupies maybe 5 to 10% of your brain's activity at most. The rest is happening in rooms you'll never enter, managed by systems that have been refined over hundreds of millions of years. Evolution doesn't preserve what doesn't work. Every automatic system you possess exists because countless generations before you survived long enough to pass it forward. Your ancestors slept under stars and in caves, in trees and on open ground, and their bodies knew how to do this. That knowledge lives in you now, encoded so deeply that you couldn't forget it if you tried. When you were a baby, no one had to teach you how to sleep. You simply did it, following instructions written in your biology. That capacity hasn't left you. It's still here, still functioning, still available even on nights when your conscious mind has convinced itself that sleep won't come. The truth is, your body wants to sleep. It's designed for it, craves it, will eventually insist upon it. Fighting sleep is like holding your breath. You can do it for a while, but the system is stronger than your will. Your biology always wins. It's just a matter of time. And here's what's happening in your brain right now as you listen or read. Your neurons are beginning their nightly housekeeping. Throughout the day, they accumulate metabolic waste, cellular debris from the work of thinking and processing. During sleep, the space between your neurons expands slightly, and cerebrospinal fluid flows through like a gentle tide, washing away the day's accumulation. This cleaning happens mostly during deep sleep, but the preparation begins now, in these quieter moments of relaxation. Your brain is getting ready to do some of its most important work, not thinking, but clearing. Not processing new information, but consolidating what matters and releasing what doesn't. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to do any of this consciously. You don't have to manage it, direct it, or even understand it. It happens on its own as naturally as your heart beats or your lungs fill with air. The simple act of lying here, of allowing your body to rest and your thoughts to slow, is enough. You're creating the conditions. Your brain knows what to do with them. Think about how different this is from the way you spend most of your waking hours. During the day, you're constantly taking in information, reading, listening, watching, responding. Your attention is divided among a dozen different demands. Your brain is in acquisition mode, gathering data, making quick decisions, reacting to whatever comes next. It's necessary, of course. It's how you navigate the world. But it's also exhausting in a way you might not fully recognize until you stop. This right now is the opposite of that mode. This is integration. This is when all that scattered input gets sorted, organized, filed away, or discarded. Your brain is deciding what was useful today and what was just noise, what's worth remembering and what can fade. It's creating space for tomorrow by clearing out today. And the more fully you relax, the more efficiently this process can happen. You might notice your thoughts drifting in strange directions now. Random images, half-formed memories, ideas that don't quite connect to anything. That's completely normal. That's part of the sorting process. Your brain is sifting through the day's experiences, testing connections, seeing what fits where. Some of it will solidify into memory. Some of it will dissolve like sugar in water, sweetening the whole but losing its individual form. You don't need to hold on to any of it. Just let it drift through. Your breathing continues, slow and steady. Your body continues to release tension bit by bit. And your brain continues its quiet work, preparing for the deeper restoration that sleep will bring. Everything is happening exactly as it should. The fascinating thing about sleep is that it's not just one uniform state. Throughout the night, your brain cycles through different stages, each with its own purpose, its own gift to offer. You'll move from light sleep into deeper stages, then up into REM sleep, where dreams unfold like stories your mind needs to tell itself. Then the cycle begins again, 4 or 5 times before morning. In those deeper stages of sleep, something remarkable happens. Your brain waves slow down dramatically, moving in long rolling rhythms that are completely different from your waking patterns. These slow waves are like a tide washing through your brain, and as they move, they carry away the metabolic waste that's built up during the day. Your brain has its own cleaning system, and it works most efficiently while you sleep. You don't need to think about any of this. You don't need to try to reach those deeper stages. Your brain knows the way. It's made this journey thousands of times before. All you need to do is let go. Let your thoughts become softer and more distant. Let your body sink deeper into comfort. Some nights you might notice your thoughts beginning to take on that strange, dreamlike quality even before you're fully asleep. Logic becomes looser. Images might drift through your mind that don't quite make sense but don't bother you either. This is your brain beginning its transition, sliding from one state into another. It's a good sign. It means you're right on the edge, right where you need to be. Your breathing has probably slowed even more by now. You might not even be aware of it happening, but your body is taking smaller, slower breaths, using less oxygen because it's doing less work. Your heart rate has dropped. Your blood pressure has lowered. Every system is downshifting, moving into its nighttime rhythm. And still, there's nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else you need to do. The world is managing perfectly well without your attention. Tomorrow will bring whatever it brings, and you'll handle it then with the restoration that sleep provides. But right now, in this moment, your only job is to rest. There's a particular kind of peace that comes from truly accepting that you don't need to figure everything out right now. Not tonight. Not in this quiet darkness. The problems that seem so urgent just hours ago, they're still just problems. They haven't grown. They haven't multiplied. They're exactly the same size they were, but your exhaustion was magnifying them, turning manageable concerns into mountains. Sleep has this remarkable ability to restore perspective. Scientists have observed how the brain processes and organizes information during sleep, how it literally sorts through the day's experiences and files them appropriately. What feels overwhelming in your fatigue often becomes merely challenging after rest. What seems impossible at midnight becomes simply difficult by morning. The situations don't change your capacity to handle them, does. Think about the last time you stayed up worrying about something, turning it over and over in your mind, examining it from every angle until you were dizzy with anxiety. And then think about how different it looked the next day, after sleep. Maybe it wasn't smaller, but it was clearer, more defined, less amorphous and terrifying. That's not coincidence. That's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do: restore, reorganize, and recalibrate. Right now, you might be thinking about tomorrow's meeting, or that difficult conversation you need to have, or the decision that's been weighing on you. And here's what I want you to know. You will handle it better rested. Every single time, the rested version of you makes better decisions than the exhausted version. The rested you has patience, creativity, resilience. The exhausted you is just trying to survive. So let tomorrow's you handle tomorrow's concerns. That's their job. Your job right now is to give them the gift of rest, to send them into the day restored and ready, rather than depleted and desperate. And that gift of rest isn't selfish, it's strategic. It's not avoidance, it's optimization. Because here's what the research on sleep and problem solving consistently shows. People who sleep on a problem literally solve it better than people who stay awake working on it. The sleeping brain doesn't just rest, it reorganizes. It forms new connections. It tests solutions in the background, while your conscious mind enjoys a well-deserved break. There's a reason they say sleep on it. It's not folk wisdom, it's neuroscience. Your brain during sleep is like a master librarian, taking all the scattered books of your day and reshelving them in ways that suddenly make sense. That problem that seemed impossible at 11 p.m. Your sleeping brain might just hand you the solution at 7 a.m., gift-trapped and ready to implement, but only if you actually let yourself sleep. Only if you stop treating rest like something you'll get around to eventually and start treating it like the foundation it actually is. And I know that some of you are lying there thinking, but my situation is different. My problems can't wait. If I don't figure this out tonight, everything will fall apart. And I hear you. I understand that urgency feels real because in your body, in your nervous system, it is real. The stress hormones don't know the difference between a genuine emergency and a manufactured one. But let me ask you this. Has staying awake worrying ever even once actually prevented something bad from happening? Has the act of lying there spinning scenarios ever changed a single outcome? Or has it just meant that when the thing you were worried about either happened or didn't happen, you faced it exhausted instead of rested? Your vigilance doesn't protect you, your rest does. Your constant mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios doesn't prepare you. Your sleep does. Because preparation isn't about imagining every possible disaster, it's about building the resilience to handle whatever actually comes. And resilience isn't built from anxiety. It's built from rest, from recovery, from giving your system the chance to recalibrate and restore itself. So as you lie here tonight, I want you to practice something radically different. Instead of trying to solve, plan, or prevent, just notice. Notice the weight of your body against the surface beneath you. Notice the temperature of the air on your face. Notice the rhythm of your breath. That steady, reliable tide that's been with you since your very first moment and will be with you until your very last. You don't have to change anything about this moment. You don't have to improve it or optimize it or make it different than it is. The breath knows what it's doing. Your heart knows its rhythm. The quiet machinery of your existence hums along without your intervention, as it always has. And in this awareness, there's a kind of surrender that isn't defeat, it's relief. The relief of letting the universe do what it's been doing all along. The relief of trusting that the same force that grew you from a single cell into this impossibly complex being, that taught your heart to beat before you had a brain to think with, that gave you eyes that can catch photons that have traveled millions of years through space, that same intelligence is here now, moving through you, breathing you, carrying you toward rest. Think about how much has had to go right for you to be here. The precise temperature of Earth's surface, maintained for billions of years. The exact distance from the sun too close and we'd burn, too far and we'd freeze. The magnetic field that shields us from radiation. The atmosphere with its perfect mixture of gases, the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, all these vast planetary systems working in concert, completely indifferent to whether we notice them or not. And then think about the chain of improbability that connects you to the beginning of life itself. 4 billion years of unbroken ancestry. 4 billion years of your ancestors successfully surviving long enough to reproduce. Through ice ages and meteor strikes, through droughts and floods, through predators and plagues, generation after generation, somehow making it through. And what were the odds that your particular combination of genes would come together in exactly this way? Your mother produced roughly 300 eggs that were viable during her reproductive years. Your father, in his lifetime, produced approximately 1 trillion sperm cells, 1 trillion. The egg that became half of you met the one sperm that became the other half, one combination out of 300 trillion possibilities from your parents alone. But it goes deeper. The particular shuffling of genes that occurred when that egg and sperm formed the crossing over of chromosomes, the random assortment created a genetic combination that had never existed before and will never exist again. You are literally, scientifically, a genetic impossibility that happened anyway. Your parents had to meet. Think about that for a moment. Two people born in the right time period, the right geographic region, moving through their lives on trajectories that had to intersect at precisely the right moment. If your mother had taken a different job, accepted a different date, moved to a different city, if your father had stayed home that one night, chosen a different university, missed that particular bus, the threads of causation that had to align for your parents to meet, to be attracted to each other, to decide to have a child, it's staggering. And their parents had to meet, and their parents. Going back through that chain of 4 billion years, every single coupling had to happen exactly as it did. One broken link, one person who decided to travel west instead of east, who survived the plague instead of succumbing to it, who caught the eye of one person instead of another, and you wouldn't be here. You are the product of an unbroken chain of incredibly unlikely events, stretching back to the first replicating molecules in ancient seas. And here's what makes it even more extraordinary. Most of those ancestors never knew they were part of this chain. They lived their lives, faced their struggles, loved and lost, without any awareness that billions of years in the future, their choices would culminate in you. They didn't know they were carrying forward something precious. They were just living. Your great-great-great-grandmother, who survived a famine in the 1840s, didn't know she was preserving a genetic line that would eventually produce you. She just knew she was hungry, and she kept going anyway. The sailor who survived a shipwreck in 1723, clinging to debris for 2 days before washing ashore, he had no idea that his refusal to let go of that piece of wood meant you would exist. He was just trying to see another sunrise. Every single one of your ancestors successfully reproduced before dying. Think about that. Every single one. In a world where most individuals across most species never reproduce, where death comes before maturity more often than not, every person in your direct line beat those odds. They survived childhood diseases that killed their siblings. They found partners when others remained alone. They lived long enough to raise children to independence, or at least to ensure someone else would. They survived wars, plagues, famines, and predators. They endured ice ages and droughts. They navigated social structures that could be deadly to navigate. They made thousands of decisions where to live, who to trust, when to run, when to stand. They made enough correct decisions to survive. One fatal mistake, and the chain breaks. One moment of bad luck, one infection, one accident, and you never come into existence. But they didn't just survive. They lived. They loved, they feared, they hoped, they grieved. They sat around fires and told stories. They sang songs whose melodies are lost to time. They laughed at jokes we'll never understand. They held their children and worried about the future, just as you might. They were not primitives stumbling through darkness. They were fully human, as intelligent, as emotional, as complex as anyone alive today. And here's what strikes me most profoundly. They had no idea they were part of a chain. No concept that their choices would echo forward through millennia. When your great-great-great-grandmother made the decision to marry one person instead of another, she had no idea she was choosing whether you would exist. When your ancestor survived a plague, they didn't know they were saving thousands of future lives, including yours. Every generation handed the baton forward without knowing what they were protecting. They simply lived their lives, made their choices, and somewhere in that vast tapestry of ordinary moments, they created the exact conditions necessary for you. Consider the sheer statistical weight of this. If we're conservative and say that humans have been around for 200,000 years, with an average generation time of 25 years, that's 8,000 generations between the first humans and you. 8,000 links in your chain. Each one had to survive to reproductive age. Each one had to find a partner. Each one had to successfully raise at least one child who would do the same. The probability of any specific person existing isn't just small. It's so microscopically tiny that our minds can't truly grasp it. One geneticist calculated that the odds of you existing exactly as you are with your specific genetic codes, roughly 1 in 10 to the power of 2,400,000. That's not just astronomical, that's a number so large it makes the atoms in the universe look trivial by comparison. And yet here you are, not as an abstraction, not as a statistical fluke that could have been someone else, but as you, with your particular laugh, your specific way of seeing sunlight through leaves, the exact texture of your memories. Every single one of your ancestors going back not just hundreds, but hundreds of thousands of generations survived long enough to reproduce. Every single one. Think about that unbroken chain stretching back through plague, famine, predators, ice ages, volcanic winters and cosmic catastrophes we don't even have names for. Your lineage never broke, not once. But it's more miraculous than even that. Because it wasn't just survival. It was timing. Your great-great-grandmother had to meet your great-great-grandfather at precisely the right moment. Not a week earlier when she was in a different town. Not a month later when he'd already married someone else. That exact moment. And then their child or great-grandparent had to meet their partner with the same impossible precision. Generation after generation after generation of perfect timing. If any one of your ancestors had turned left instead of right, had stayed home that day instead of going out, had chosen the other path in any of 10,000 daily decisions, you wouldn't exist. Not a slightly different you, not you with different hair color, not you at all. Someone else might exist in your place, but that someone wouldn't be you, wouldn't have your consciousness, your inner world, your specific experience of being alive. The philosopher Nick Bostrom calls this the anthropic shadow, the hidden history of near misses we can never see because we only exist in the timeline where everything went exactly right. For you to be here reading these words, taking this breath, requires not just that the universe began, not just that stars formed and planets coalesced and life emerged and evolution proceeded. It requires that reality threaded the needle of probability so impossibly narrow that mathematics can barely describe it. You are not just rare. You are the result of the most improbable thing that has ever happened in this or any universe. And you're experiencing it right now, this moment, this thought. This breath moving through your lungs. This is what winning the cosmic lottery feels like from the inside. Most lottery winners never even realize they've won. And you know what the strangest part is? The ticket was free. You didn't have to earn your way into existence. You didn't submit an application to be born. There was no interview process for becoming conscious, no entrance exam for awareness. The universe simply dealt you in, handed you the most improbable gift imaginable and said, "Here, this is yours. Do with it what you will." Think about that for a moment. Everything you've ever worried about earning, deserving, being worthy of, and the most miraculous thing you'll ever receive was given freely, before you could even conceive of gratitude. Your ancestors didn't just survive, they thrived long enough to pass the torch. Through ice ages and droughts, through predators and plagues, through every catastrophe that could have ended your lineage, they persisted. They found food when there was none. They found shelter when the elements turned hostile. They found each other in a world that was vast and often cruel. And here's something we rarely consider. They found meaning. They sat around fires and told stories. They looked at the same stars you can see tonight and wondered. They laughed even in the hardest times. They loved even knowing loss was inevitable. They created art on cave walls that still moves us 30,000 years later. You carry their resilience in your cells, their creativity in your neurons, their capacity for wonder encoded in your DNA. You are not just the recipient of biological material, you're the inheritor of an unbroken chain of consciousness that stretches back to the first organism that could sense light, feel warmth, move toward what sustained it, and away from what threatened it. And before even that, you inherited something stranger still. The very atoms that form your body, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon that makes up every cell, these weren't created here. They were forged in the hearts of stars that lived and died billions of years before our sun even existed. Every breath you take contains nitrogen atoms that were once part of ancient bacteria, then plants, then animals, recycling through Earth's atmosphere for eons. The water in your cells has traveled through clouds and oceans, through dinosaurs and primordial seas. Your body is literally made of stardust and ancient rain, assembled temporarily into the specific pattern that is you. Think about that. The universe spent billions of years preparing the materials for your existence. Stars had to live entire lifetimes, burning through their fuel, then exploding in spectacular supernova to scatter heavy elements across space. Gravity had to pull those scattered atoms together into new solar systems. Chemistry had to arrange them into molecules complex enough to store information, to replicate, to evolve. Your body required the entire history of the cosmos to become possible. You are not separate from the universe, you are what the universe is doing right here, right now. You are the universe experiencing itself, thinking about itself, wondering about itself, and that inheritance cosmic, biological, psychological isn't static. It's not a finished product you simply receive. You're actively participating in it, adding to it, transforming it with every choice you make, every thought you think, every connection you form with another person. When you learn something new, you're not just changing your own brain. You're adding to the collective human knowledge that might be passed forward. When you show kindness, you're not just affecting one moment. You're potentially altering someone else's neural pathways, changing how they'll interact with others, sending ripples forward through time. Your existence creates patterns that echo forward. Scientists call this the butterfly effect, but it's more precise than chaos. Every choice you make literally rewrites the probability field of what comes next. When you choose patience over anger in traffic, that calm arrives home with you, affecting how you speak to your family, which affects how they treat their colleagues tomorrow, which cascades outward in ways no equation could ever map. Think about teachers. A good teacher doesn't just transfer information, they reshape how a student's mind approaches problems for the rest of that student's life. I can still hear the voice of my 7th grade English teacher explaining how to look for themes in stories, that particular neural pathway she created in my brain. It's fired millions of times since then. She died years ago, but her influence continues operating through the pattern she established in my thinking, and through these words I'm writing now, which you're reading, creating new patterns in your mind. This is functional immortality, not metaphorical, actual. The patterns you create in other minds outlive your body. Every person you've ever taught anything to carries forward a version of your thinking. Every time you've explained your perspective, you've literally installed part of your cognitive architecture into someone else's brain. They might build on it, modify it, reject parts of it, but your influence on their thinking is real and permanent. Consider recipes passed through families. My grandmother's recipe for apple pie exists now in the hands of people who never met her. Each time someone makes it, they're running a program she wrote decades ago. The specific sequence of steps, the particular combination of spices, the technique for the crust, these are algorithms she designed, and they continue executing in kitchens she'll never see. Her innovation, her creativity, her specific solution to the problem of making delicious pie, it survived the death of her neurons because she encoded it in a transferable form. This works with emotional patterns too. If you grew up in a home where conflicts were resolved through conversation rather than shouting, you probably replicate that pattern. You learn not just what worked, but a template for what working looks like. And now, when tension rises in your own relationships, you reach for that template. You might not remember the specific conversation your parents had when you were 7, but the shape of resolution, the rhythm of listening and responding, that pattern lives in you. It guides your behavior decades later. This is where culture becomes incredibly powerful, because culture is essentially a massive library of successful patterns that humans discovered and then encoded for transmission. Agriculture isn't just a practice, it's a pattern. Someone somewhere noticed that seeds from eaten fruit grew into new plants. They experimented, they refined the technique, they taught others. And that pattern of turning soil, planting seeds, tending crops, that survived across thousands of generations because it was encoded in stories, demonstrations, seasonal rituals. The same is true for social structures. Democracy, as messy and imperfect as it is, represents a pattern someone discovered for organizing group decision-making without constant violence. Trial and error, observation, and refinement. Then codification into constitutions, procedures, cultural expectations. The pattern outlives any individual democratic society because it's been encoded in a form that can be studied, adapted, re-implemented. Even our sense of beauty follows patterns that got encoded culturally. The golden ratio appears in art and architecture across civilizations, not because it's mystically perfect, but because human visual processing finds certain proportions pleasing, and once someone noticed that pattern, it could be taught, replicated, refined. The pattern spread because it worked, because it reliably produced an emotional response. And here's what makes this even more fascinating. These patterns can evolve without conscious intention. Language is the perfect example. No committee designed English. No single person invented grammar. Instead, millions of humans trying to communicate clearly gradually shaped patterns of sound and syntax that worked better than random noise. Successful patterns were imitated. Unsuccessful ones were abandoned. The language itself became a self-refining system of patterns, evolving across generations through nothing more than use and transmission. You're participating in this right now. The way you speak, the idioms you use, the rhythm of your sentences, all of that reflects patterns that successfully conveyed meaning for previous speakers. You inherited them. You're modifying them slightly through your own use. And you'll pass them on slightly changed to whoever learns language from you. And here's something that might surprise you. The changes you make to language, they're not random. They follow patterns. Patterns that repeat across languages, across centuries, across continents where people never met. When languages simplify irregular verbs, they almost always do it in the same direction. Children say goed instead of went, and sometimes that error sticks. The irregular form fades. The regular pattern wins. It's happened in English. It's happening right now in German. It happened in the Romance languages centuries ago. Sound changes follow rules too. Not conscious rules, not taught in schools, but rules nonetheless. When a sound shifts in one word, it shifts in all words with that sound in that position. That's why linguists can predict how ancient languages sounded, even with no recordings. The patterns are that consistent. Languages evolve like living things, but they're constrained by the architecture of the human mouth, the limits of human memory, the needs of human communication. There are only so many ways a language can change and still function, which means that when you speak, you're not just part of one lineage. You're part of a universal human pattern. Your lazy pronunciation, your creative slang, your little grammatical shortcuts, they're the same kinds of innovations humans have been making for 50,000 years. You're following in ancient footsteps, even when you think you're breaking rules. Let's talk about something concrete. The word silly, simple word, means foolish, absurd, lacking good sense. But rewind 600 years and silly meant blessed, holy, innocent in a sacred way. A silly soul was a blessed soul touched by divine grace. How does a word travel from holy to foolish? Through a very human process. Blessed implied innocence. Innocence implied naivete. Naivete implied gullibility. Gullibility implied foolishness. Each generation shifted the meaning just slightly, following the associations their minds made naturally. None of them decided to change it. None of them noticed they were changing it. But the path was worn smooth by thousands of speakers, each one nudging the meaning a tiny bit further from sacred towards silly. And this pattern, this semantic drift, it's everywhere. Nice used to mean ignorant. Awful meant worthy of awe. Terrific meant terrifying. Language mutates like living tissue. It heals around wounds, grows toward light, adapts to new terrain. Consider the word silly. In Old English it meant blessed or happy. Then it shifted to innocent, then weak, then foolish. A word traveled from divine grace to playground insult across centuries of human mouths. Bully once meant sweetheart, a term of endearment. Naughty simply meant having nothing. Sophisticated was an insult. It meant corrupted, adulterated, no longer pure. We speak with fossils in our mouths. Every sentence carries sediment from dead civilizations, forgotten contexts, abandoned meanings. The word Lord comes from loaf ward, the keeper of bread. Lady from loaf kneader, the maker of bread. Our nobility was once defined by proximity to food, by who controlled hunger and abundance. Companion breaks down to calm and pannies with bread. A companion is someone you share bread with. Every time you say the word, you're invoking ancient tables, the primal act of breaking bread together. Salary comes from salt. Roman soldiers received salt rations. We still describe good workers as worth their salt. Still speak of salt of the earth. Still carry the mineral economics of the ancient world in casual phrases. Language preserves what we've forgotten we knew. The word sinister meant left-handed. The word dexterous meant right-handed. One became evil, the other skillful. Left-handed children throughout history absorbed this bias with their first vocabulary lessons, learning they were linguistically wrong before they could read. Hysteria came from the Greek word for uterus. For centuries, women's emotions were literally defined as symptoms of their anatomy. The word encoded a medical theory that was always a cultural prejudice. But here's the thing about language. It can be reclaimed, redirected, reborn. Queer was a slur until a community picked it up, polished it, wore it as armor and banner both. Geek meant carnival freak before it meant tech genius. Words can be conquered from the inside. We are not passive recipients of language. We are its co-creators, its constant renovators. Every generation inherits a dictionary and returns it revised. We add words the previous generation never needed. Podcast, selfie, ghosting, doom scrolling. We retire words that no longer serve, or we hollow them out and fill them with new meaning. Awesome used to be reserved for God and canyons. Now it describes a sandwich. Language doesn't just change, it reveals us. It shows where our attention has drifted, what we've learned to care about, what we've stopped noticing. Consider the Inuit languages and their famous multiplicity of words for snow. The claim has been exaggerated over time. They don't have 50 words for snow. But they do have more than English does, because snow matters differently when your survival depends on reading its texture, its age, its likelihood to bear weight or avalanche. You develop vocabulary for what you need to navigate. English speakers have one word for snow but dozens for being busy. We're swamped, slammed, buried, drowning, underwater, crushed, slammed, in the weeds, up to our eyeballs. We've built an entire semantic field around the experience of having too much to do, because that's the terrain we navigate daily. That's our snow. Different languages carve up color differently. Russian has separate words for light blue and dark blue. They're not shades of one color. They're distinct colors. The way English speakers see red and pink is fundamentally different. And studies show that Russian speakers can distinguish between shades of blue faster than English speakers, because their language has trained their perception. The words we have shape what we see. Or maybe what we see shapes the words we keep, probably both, in an endless loop. Some languages have no future tense. They talk about tomorrow using the same grammar as today. Linguists have found that speakers of these languages save more money and are more likely to practice safe sex, because linguistically, the future isn't distant, it's just the present, arriving. The grammar makes tomorrow feel closer, more real, more continuous with now. Language doesn't just describe reality, it structures how we move through it. Japanese has multiple counting systems depending on what you're counting: flat things, long things, small animals, large animals, machines, books. English uses the same number regardless. One apple, one pencil, one day, one chance. We don't differentiate. But maybe we lose something in that efficiency, some attention to the particular shape of what we're quantifying. Or maybe we gain something. Maybe the universality of English numbers lets us move faster, think more abstractly, build systems that transcend the physical. There's no right answer, just trade-offs all the way down. And that's the thing about language and numbers that keeps me up sometimes. We treat them like they're separate words over here, math over there, but they're not. They're both just symbol systems we invented to point at reality, and the symbols we choose shape what we can see. Take 0. In English, it's just another number, 0, 1, 2, 3. But in some languages, 0 doesn't exist as a standalone concept. You don't have 0 apples, zoo, just don't have apples. The absence isn't counted, and for thousands of years, most mathematical systems didn't have 0 either. Roman numerals had no symbol for nothing. You couldn't write 0. You couldn't calculate with it. Then someone, probably multiple someones across different cultures, realized you could treat absence as a presence. You could give nothing a name, and suddenly placeholder notation became possible. Suddenly you could do algebra. The entire structure of mathematics transformed because we added a word for what isn't there. Language created the concept. The concept changed reality. Or maybe it revealed something that was always true, just invisible to us before we had the word to see it. I think about that with emotions too. English has love as this monolithic thing, but Greek had multiple words: eros, philia, storge, agape, different loves for different relationships. Some languages have words for feelings English doesn't name. The Portuguese saudade, that deep nostalgic longing. The German Weltschmerz, the pain of existence itself. The Japanese mono no aware, the bittersweet awareness of impermanence. Are we feeling these things and just not naming them? Or does having the word make you notice the feeling more? Does language reveal emotion, or does it create the categories we sort our inner life into? I don't know. But I know that learning a new word for an emotion sometimes feels like discovering a room in your house you didn't know existed. It was always there. You just didn't have the door. And once you open that door, once you name what's been living quietly inside you, something shifts. Not everything, not always dramatically, but there's a kind of relief in recognition, a settling. I think that's why we hold on to certain words even when they're hard to explain. Why we'll say something is asterisk sword aid asterisk instead of just missing, or asterisk hig asterisk instead of just cozy. Because the English version feels like a translation of the truth, not the truth itself, and maybe that's okay. Maybe language is always a little bit of a translation. Even when we're speaking our mother tongue, even when we think we're being perfectly clear, we're still just pointing at something deeper, something that exists beneath words entirely. I read once that the poet Rumi said, "Silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation." I'm not sure I'd go that far. I think words can be pretty magnificent when they want to be, but I understand what he meant. There's always something that escapes, always something left unsaid, not because we don't want to say it, but because it doesn't fit into the shapes our mouths can make. But we try anyway. We keep trying. We invent new words and borrow old ones and twist meanings until they fit what we feel. We write poetry and tell stories and make up metaphors because even a poor translation is better than silence when you need to be understood. And sometimes the attempt itself is the point. Sometimes, when you try to explain something, even if you fail, the other person sees the effort. They see you reaching, and they reach back. I think that's what connection really is. Not perfect understanding, but the willingness to try. The willingness to say, I don't have the right words, but here's what I mean, and trust that the other person will meet you halfway. Because the truth is, no one will ever fully understand you, not completely. Not the way you understand yourself in those rare crystalline moments when everything makes sense. But they can get close, close enough to matter, close enough to make you feel less alone in all this vastness. And maybe that's what all these untranslatable words are really about. Not capturing something perfectly, but acknowledging that we're all trying to capture the same things. That across languages and cultures and centuries, humans have always felt this inexplicable ache, this bittersweet joy, this complicated tangle of emotions that don't have simple names. We've all stood at the edge of something beautiful and felt our hearts break a little. We've all experienced comfort in small rituals. We've all known what it's like to miss something we can't quite name. The words are different, but the feeling is universal. And perhaps that's why we keep creating new words for it. Because one language, one culture, one era cannot possibly capture all of it. The Greeks needed 8 different words because one wouldn't do. We borrow from the French when English falls short. We reach for ancient Sanskrit when modern tongues cannot express what our hearts already know. Language evolves around love the way a river shapes stone, slowly, persistently, carving new pathways when the old ones no longer serve. In the 1800s, lovers exchanged tussie-mussies, small bouquets where each flower carried coded meaning. A red rose for passion, yellow for friendship, white jasmine for sweet love. They spoke through petals because sometimes words were too dangerous, too forward, too revealing. Today we have emoji, different century, different symbols. Same human need to say what cannot quite be said. The word romance itself has traveled through time like a message in a bottle. It comes from Roman, literally meaning written in the Roman vernacular rather than Latin. Romance languages, romance novels, romantic love, all connected to this idea of speaking in the common tongue, the language of ordinary people, the words everyone could understand. Love has always been vernacular, accessible. It belongs to all of us. You don't need to be a poet to feel it. You don't need to be a scholar to recognize it. A child knows love before they know the alphabet. An elder feels it when words have begun to fade. It exists before language and after it. I think about that sometimes. How love will outlive all our words for it. Long after English has evolved into something unrecognizable, long after every language we speak today has transformed or vanished, people will still feel this. They'll still reach for each other in the dark. Still create new words because the old ones won't stretch far enough. Still try to define the indefinable. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the trying matters more than the succeeding. The reaching for words teaches us something about what we're feeling. Each language we explore, each definition we consider, adds another facet to our understanding, like light through a prism. One beam becomes many colors, each one true, each one different, none of them quite capturing the whole of it. Because guilt isn't a single thing. It's a constellation of feelings that we've labeled with one word for convenience. Sometimes what we call guilt is actually grief. The ache of knowing we can't go back and choose differently. Can't rewind time and say the kinder thing, make the wiser choice, be the person we wish we'd been. Sometimes it's fear. Fear that if we admit we were wrong, we'll lose something important. Love, respect. The story we've told ourselves about who we are. Sometimes it's shame masquerading as guilt. Shame about our humanity, about having needs, about being imperfect in a world that seems to demand perfection. I think about the mother who feels guilty for working, and guilty for not working. Guilty for the moments of frustration with her children. Guilty for the moments of joy that don't include them. Caught in an impossible maze where every path leads to self-judgment. What she's really feeling isn't guilt. It's the weight of impossible expectations colliding with actual human limitation. Or the friend who feels guilty for not being available enough, for having boundaries, for needing their own space and time. What they're calling guilt is often just the discomfort of disappointing someone else's expectations. We've been taught that guilt is the price of being a good person, that constant self-flagellation is proof of our moral character. But what if that's backwards? What if true moral growth comes not from drowning in guilt, but from honest assessment, from looking clearly at our actions, understanding their impact, and choosing differently going forward? There's a question I've found useful. Is this guilt serving anyone? Is my guilt about that conversation from 3 years ago changing anything? Is it making amends? Is it preventing future harm? Or is it just a form of self-punishment that I've grown comfortable with? Sometimes we hold on to guilt because it feels like we're doing something. Like by feeling bad enough, long enough, we're somehow paying a debt. But guilt without action isn't payment. It's just suffering. And suffering by itself fixes nothing. The people who hurt us rarely punish themselves. They move on. They sleep peacefully. They've already written their version of the story where they're not the villain. Meanwhile, we're left holding the weight of what happened, replaying it, trying to understand it, trying to fix something that was never ours to fix. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Our suffering doesn't reach them. It doesn't teach them a lesson. It doesn't balance any cosmic scale. The only person experiencing our pain is us. I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because believing otherwise keeps us trapped. It keeps us performing our hurt as if someone's watching, as if someone's keeping score, as if eventually they'll realize what they've done, and everything will be made right. But they won't. And even if they did, it wouldn't erase what happened. It wouldn't give us back the time we spent suffering. It wouldn't undo the harm. So what do we do with that? How do we live with the unfairness of it all? We stop waiting for the world to fix itself. We stop waiting for apologies that may never come. We stop holding our healing hostage to someone else's realization. We start treating our pain like something that matters, not because of what caused it, but because we're the ones carrying it. There's a difference between dishonoring our pain and being imprisoned by it. We can acknowledge what happened without letting it script the rest of our lives. We can say, yes, that was terrible. Yes, it shouldn't have happened. And yes, I'm still here, and I still get to decide what comes next. This isn't about forced positivity. It's not about pretending we're fine when we're not. It's about recognizing that staying in the wound doesn't heal it. Pressing on a bruise doesn't make it fade faster. Sometimes the most radical thing we can do is stop making our pain prove itself. Stop justifying why we feel the way we feel. Stop defending our right to be hurt. Of course we're hurt. Of course it matters. Now what? And the answer isn't to pretend we're not hurt. It isn't to gaslight ourselves into believing that someone's casual cruelty was actually fine. It's not about becoming so thick-skinned that nothing reaches us anymore, so armored that we become unreachable even to genuine connection. The answer is simpler, though not easier. We acknowledge the hurt. We feel it fully. We let ourselves be disappointed, sad, angry, whatever the emotion is. And then we make a choice about what to do with it. Sometimes that choice is to speak up, to say calmly and clearly, "That hurt me. Here's why." Not as an attack, not as a demand for apology, but as an offering of truth, an invitation to understanding. Sometimes the choice is to adjust our expectations, to recognize that this person, for whatever reason, isn't capable of meeting us where we need to be met, not because they're terrible, but because they're limited in ways that matter to us. And sometimes, perhaps most often, the choice is to simply let it move through us, to feel it, acknowledge it, and then release it. Like watching a storm pass overhead. The lightning still flashes, the thunder still rolls, but we're not trying to hold on to it or make it mean more than it does. Because here's what I've learned about hurt. It compounds when we resist it, when we tell ourselves we shouldn't feel what we feel, when we judge ourselves for caring, when we replay the moment over and over trying to figure out how to not have been hurt by something that hurt us. The hurt itself is usually temporary. It's the story we tell about the hurt that becomes chronic. This always happens to me. People always let me down. I'm too sensitive. I can't trust anyone. These narratives, these are what transform a moment of pain into a permanent condition. What if instead we told a different story? That hurt, and that's okay. I'm allowed to feel hurt. And also I'm resilient enough to feel this and be okay. Maybe you cry. Maybe you journal. Maybe you just let yourself feel the heaviness without trying to fix it immediately. And here's what's different now. You're not making it mean something catastrophic about you. You're not spiraling into I'm unlovable or I'll always be alone or there's something fundamentally broken in me. You're just hurt because something hurtful happened. That's it. That's the whole story. The hurt becomes information instead of identity. It tells you something about what you value, what you need, what matters to you. But it doesn't define your worth or predict your future. This is emotional maturity. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to hold pain without letting it destroy you. And over time, something shifts. The hurt doesn't vanish overnight, but it stops taking up quite so much space. You notice other things again, the way light falls through your window, a song that makes you smile, a conversation that actually energizes you instead of draining you. Recovery isn't linear. Some days you feel fine, and then suddenly you're back in it, feeling everything all over again. But even that becomes data instead of defeat. Oh, this is a tender day. That makes sense. I'll be gentle with myself today. See how different that is from why am I still not over this? What's wrong with me? One is compassion. The other is just more violence, dressed up as self-improvement. And gradually you start to notice something remarkable. The relationship that once felt like your entire world starts to feel like one chapter in a much longer story. A significant chapter, yes. One that taught you things, shaped you, maybe even broke you open in ways that ultimately made you more whole. But not the only chapter, not even the defining one. You begin to reclaim the parts of yourself that got lost, the hobbies you stopped doing, the friends you drifted from, the dreams you put on hold because they didn't fit into the life you were trying to build with someone else. And you realize something powerful. You don't need to become someone new to move forward. You just need to come back to yourself. The version of you that existed before the relationship isn't gone. And the version of you that's emerging now isn't starting from scratch. You're integrating, taking the lessons, leaving the pain, building something that actually fits who you're becoming. You're not becoming someone else. You're becoming more yourself. That's what this process has been doing underneath all the confusion and pain. Think about it. When you were younger, you probably adapted. You learned what got approval, what kept you safe, what made others comfortable. You built versions of yourself that fit into spaces that weren't really designed for who you actually are. And for a while that worked, until it didn't. The breaking apart wasn't failure. It was your authentic self finally saying, "This doesn't fit anymore. I need room to breathe." Every time you chose differently, every boundary you set, every relationship you walked away from, every expectation you stopped trying to meet, that was you making space for the real version. The you who doesn't perform constantly, who doesn't shrink to make others comfortable, who doesn't apologize for having needs or taking up space. The you who's been there all along, just waiting for permission to exist. And here's what's beautiful about this stage. You're not trying to impress anyone anymore. You're not building an image or maintaining a persona. You're just being, which feels strange at first, almost too simple. Like, wait, I can just be myself and that's enough? Yes, that's literally the whole point. You don't need to be more interesting, more accomplished, more anything. The relief you've been searching for doesn't come from adding more to who you are. It comes from subtracting everything that wasn't really you to begin with. All those layers of performance and protection and people-pleasing. You're letting them fall away, and what's underneath isn't broken or insufficient. It's just real. Flawed, imperfect, still figuring things out, but real. That's what integration actually looks like. Not perfection, not having it all figured out. Just the willingness to show up as yourself and trust that's enough. Because it is. It always has been. The people who belong in your life will recognize you. The opportunities that are meant for you will find you. The peace you've been chasing will settle in when you stop running from who you actually are. And here's what nobody tells you about that peace: it doesn't arrive with fanfare. There's no moment where the sky opens up and a voice announces, "Congratulations, you've finally figured yourself out." Instead, it shows up quietly, like someone slipping into the seat next to you on a long train ride. One day you just notice that the constant noise in your head has gotten softer. The anxiety about whether you're enough, whether you're doing it right, whether people like you's still there sometimes, but it doesn't run your life anymore. You start making decisions from a different place. Not from fear of what you'll lose, but from curiosity about what you might discover. You say no to things without crafting elaborate explanations. You say yes to things that scare you a little, in the good way, the way that means you're growing instead of shrinking. I've watched people transform when they finally give themselves permission to stop performing. A woman I know spent 20 years in a career she hated because she'd told everyone at her college graduation that this was her dream. 20 years of waking up with dread in her stomach, convincing herself that commitment meant suffering through. When she finally quit, she braced herself for judgment, for I tell deuces, for disappointed faces. Instead, people said, "I always wondered if you were really happy." They could see what she'd been hiding from herself. That's the strange gift of authenticity. It gives other people permission too. When you stop pretending, the people around you exhale. Suddenly they don't have to maintain their own performance for your sake. Relationships become easier because they're built on what's true instead of what's carefully managed. Conversations go deeper because no one's expending energy on keeping up appearances. This doesn't mean life suddenly becomes simple. You'll still have hard days, still face rejection, still encounter people who don't understand you. But there's a difference between pain that comes from growing and pain that comes from constantly betraying yourself. One moves you forward, the other just makes you smaller. The question isn't whether you'll face difficulty. The question is, will you face it as yourself or as someone you think you should be? There's a study that followed actors over the course of their careers. The ones who became household names weren't necessarily the most talented. They were the ones who developed what researchers called distinctive authenticity. They had quirks they didn't hide, voices they didn't smooth out, faces that moved in unusual ways. The ones who tried to be generically appealing, who sanded down their edges to fit a mold. They got work, sure, but they disappeared into the background of every scene. You are not background. You're the story someone needs to hear told in exactly your voice. I know someone who spent years in corporate environments trying to be professional, which really meant trying to be beige. They had opinions they never shared, jokes they swallowed, a whole way of seeing the world that never made it into a single meeting. Then they started a business, and suddenly that weirdness, that specific lens through which they saw problems, became their entire value proposition. Clients didn't hire them despite their quirks. They hired them because of those quirks. What you've been hiding might be the exact thing someone is searching for. Think about the advice that actually changed your life. I'm willing to bet it didn't come from someone perfectly polished. It came from someone who told you something real, something a little raw, something that could only come from their specific experience of being alive. That's what authenticity does. It gives people permission to be real too. And here's what nobody tells you about that permission. It's contagious. When you show up as yourself, you make it safer for others to do the same. It's like you're saying, without words, you don't have to perform here. You can just be. And in a world that constantly demands performance, that's a radical gift. Perhaps that's why silent companionship feels so sacred these days. In the age of constant connectivity, where we can video call someone halfway across the world at any moment, where we're expected to respond to messages within minutes, where our presence is constantly documented and broadcasted, choosing to simply sit with someone without agenda feels almost countercultural. We've become so accustomed to transactional interactions. Every conversation seems to have a purpose. Networking, venting, problem-solving, entertaining. Even our friendships can start to feel like they need justification. We meet for coffee to catch up, as if the relationship requires regular updates to remain valid. We schedule quality time like appointments. We document our togetherness in photos to prove it happened. But silent companionship exists outside that framework entirely. It doesn't produce anything. It doesn't advance any agenda. It can't be quantified or optimized. You can't really post about it. Had a great time sitting silently with Sarah for 40 minutes. Doesn't quite capture it, does it? And maybe that's precisely what makes it so valuable. It's one of the few experiences left that exists purely for its own sake. I think about how this plays out in different relationships. With old friends, those comfortable silences are often the mark of how deep the connection goes. You know you've reached a certain level of friendship when you can spend an entire car ride together without speaking, and it doesn't feel awkward at all. There's security in that, knowing that your relationship doesn't depend on your ability to be interesting or entertaining in every moment. With family, it can be even more profound. Sitting with an aging parent, not needing to fill the space with words. Just being in the same room while they read or nap or gaze out the window. Sometimes the most loving thing we can offer isn't advice or distraction or cheerfulness, but simply our unhurried presence, the permission to be quiet together, to let someone feel what they're feeling without trying to fix it or redirect it. There's a Japanese concept *ma* which refers to the space between things, not emptiness, but rather the interval that gives meaning to what surrounds it. In music, it's the silence between notes that creates the melody. In relationships, it's the pauses that make room for genuine connection. We've become so uncomfortable with these spaces. We rush to fill them with noise, with commentary, with our own interpretations of what someone else is experiencing. But sometimes the most profound communication happens in the gaps between words, when we trust that simply being alongside someone is enough. I think about the way children understand this instinctively, before we teach them otherwise. A toddler who brings you their favorite toy when you're sad, not to distract you, but as an offering of what they treasure most. They don't have elaborate speeches about emotional processing. They just sit beside you, maybe lean against your leg, sharing their small, warm presence. There's something we lose as we grow older, this belief that presence alone carries weight. We start to think we need to be useful, to provide solutions, to justify the space we occupy in someone else's suffering. But grief doesn't ask for solutions. Pain doesn't require our commentary. Sometimes what's needed is just another heartbeat in the room, steady and unhurried. The friend who shows up with groceries and doesn't ask if you need anything because they already know you do. Who puts away the milk, makes sure there's bread and coffee, leaves a note that says "I'll check in tomorrow," and then quietly goes. No dramatic declarations, no demands for gratitude or acknowledgement. Just the practical tenderness of making sure you can eat breakfast, because that's what love looks like on an ordinary Tuesday when the world feels impossible. These small acts of showing up, they accumulate like snowfall, quiet and persistent, until suddenly you realize you're standing on solid ground again. Not because anyone said the perfect thing or solved your problems, but because they kept appearing, kept witnessing, kept believing that your experience mattered even when you weren't sure it did. And perhaps that's the difference between support that transforms and support that simply occupies space, the willingness to stay uncomfortable. Because here's what I've noticed. The people who actually help aren't the ones rushing to make you feel better. They're the ones willing to feel worse with you for a while. They don't need to fix your sadness to manage their own anxiety about witnessing it. They can sit in the murky middle space where nothing is resolved and no one has answers, and the only thing happening is shared presence. I remember a conversation with someone I barely knew, actually. We'd met a handful of times through mutual friends, but when I was going through something particularly difficult, they sent a message that said, "I don't know what to say, and I'm sure I'll say the wrong thing, but I'm here if you want to talk or not talk." And we ended up on the phone for hours. What struck me wasn't their wisdom, they didn't have any special insights. What struck me was their honesty about not having insights. Their willingness to show up anyway, uncertainty and all. Contrast that with the well-meaning friends who said all the right things but couldn't handle the fact that those right things didn't immediately make me better. Who got visibly frustrated when I was still sad the next week. Whose support came with an unspoken expectation of gratitude that felt like performance rather than connection. Their help required me to manage their feelings about my feelings, which meant I wasn't actually being supported. I was doing emotional labor while pretending to receive it. The truth is, being truly supportive requires a kind of ego death. You have to accept that you're not the hero of this story. You're not going to save anyone. Your brilliant advice might be completely useless. Your presence might not noticeably change anything, and you have to be okay with that, with being a supporting character in someone else's hard chapter, mattering without being essential, helping without being heroic. Because here's what they don't tell you about being there for someone. Most of the time you're just there. You're not fixing. You're not transforming. You're not the catalyst for their breakthrough moment. You're the person who shows up on a Tuesday with groceries they didn't ask for. You're the text message that says "thinking of you" that gets read but not answered for 3 days. You're the friend who sits through the same conversation for the 5th time, hearing the same fears recycled with slightly different words, and it feels honestly like nothing. It feels inadequate, insufficient, like you should be doing more, saying more, being more. But here's the thing about presence. It accumulates. It compounds in ways you can't measure in real time. That grocery run doesn't fix their depression, but it means they eat something other than cereal for dinner. That unanswered text doesn't pull them out of their spiral, but it plants a small flag that says you're not forgotten in the landscape of their isolation. That fifth repetition of the same conversation doesn't solve their problem, but it confirms that their struggle is real enough to be witnessed again and again. You're not building a monument, you're laying bricks. Tiny, unremarkable bricks that don't look like much individually, but that, over time, create a foundation someone can eventually stand on. And the hardest part? You might never see the structure. You might lay your bricks and walk away, never knowing if they mattered, never getting confirmation that your small acts of showing up accumulated into something meaningful. That's the real test of compassion, not whether you're willing to be heroic, but whether you're willing to be consistently, quietly present without the reward of knowing you made a difference. Because sometimes the person you're helping won't remember half of what you did. They'll be too deep in their fog, too consumed by their pain, too focused on surviving to catalogue your contributions. And years later, when they're better, when they've made it through, they might think, I got through that alone because pain has a way of erasing the small kindnesses that made survival possible. And you have to be okay with that too. You have to be okay with being the person who cared when caring wasn't trendy, when it wasn't documented, when it didn't come with validation. Because here's what we don't talk about enough. Kindness in the dark, the kind nobody sees, nobody applauds, nobody even knows happened, that's the kindness that changes the architecture of someone's life. That stranger you smiled at in the grocery store, who was contemplating whether they mattered enough to keep going. That coworker you checked in on who was drowning in silence. That friend you texted at random who was, at that exact moment, feeling completely forgotten by the world. You'll never know the weight of what you prevented, the spiral you interrupted, the tragedy you unknowingly diverted with your accidental timing and deliberate care. The universe doesn't send you a report card. There's no annual summary of lives touched or disasters averted through small kindness. You just have to trust that your compassion enters the world and does its work invisibly. The way roots strengthen soil, the way mycelium networks feed entire forests without ever being seen. And yes, this means you'll sometimes feel like you're pouring yourself into a void. You'll wonder if any of it matters. You'll question whether your kindness is making any difference at all, or if you're just exhausting yourself for nothing. And in those moments, remember this. The fact that you can't measure the impact doesn't mean there isn't any. The most important things in life are unmeasurable. Love, hope, the split-second decision not to give up. You can't quantify them, but they're everything. You're not obligated to be kind, of course. You could choose differently. You could protect your energy, guard your heart, offer nothing that won't be returned. And honestly, nobody would blame you. The world is exhausting enough without carrying other people's weight too. But here's the truth that sits beneath all of this. You're kind anyway, not because you have to be, not because someone's watching, but because somewhere along the way you decided that the world needs more gentleness, and you're willing to be the person who provides it, even when it costs you, even when nobody notices, even when the return on investment is invisible.